Good evening and welcome to a brand new series, Out of This World. Over the next few weeks we'll be looking at a range of stories and experiences which seem to have no conventional explanation. We'll be meeting ordinary people who claim to have experienced strange and sometimes frightening events which have changed their lives. But what lies behind these mysteries? Can science provide the answer? With the help of experts, we've conducted experiments on a number of subjects which have never been put to the test before, and the results are fascinating. We want you to take part too. We'll be investigating claims that your pet can somehow read your mind, and discovering whether we all have a psychic sixth sense. But tonight we want to find out if you're especially lucky or unlucky. We'll give you details later in the show. Joining me on the series is Chris Choi.
It's my job to search for answers to some of the most curious and baffling cases. I've seen photos of ghost-like figures. I've listened to tapes of strange noises and voices. I've heard accounts of unidentified flying objects in our skies. But nothing has been more intriguing than these photographs of one of the world's most enduring mysteries, spontaneous human combustion. It's been around for hundreds of years. The idea that the human body can somehow burst into flames, leaving behind a pile of ash, unburnt limbs, and horrified witnesses. Scientists believe they can explain it all. But can they? I've discovered new evidence that raises the mystery once more. My journey started with the remains of 83-year-old Henry Thomas, who died in 1980.
This drawing led me straight to Ebbw Vale, to one of the few who've seen the horror for real.
Here there was an open grate with an open coal fire, and on the floor, several inches away from the grate, was a pile of ashes covering this area here, and at about this position, on the bottom edge of the ashes, were two male human feet clad in socks and with short lengths of trouser legs above. And just beyond the knee joint, the bones then turned into a pure white and were broken of their own accord and collapsed into a mass of white ash mingled with the ashes of the clothing.
There must have been an incredible heat to do that to a human body, and yet the furniture hadn't caught fire. I mean, was there any other indication of the intensity of this blaze?
Yes, well, on the opposite wall, the furthest wall here, was a television set, the plastic control knobs of which had melted down into icicle shapes. Now you need a terrific form of heat but no oxygen in order to melt plastic knobs at that distance and yet not burn linen a foot or so away.
The official investigators said he simply fell into the fire. Isn't that a perfectly rational explanation?
No, it isn't, because I've dealt with a case of a man who's fallen head first into a fire and the head doesn't burn, not like that. And secondly, they said that he had to have gotten out of the fire while he's still alive so that he was able to sit down and burn to death in a chair. But having seen the results and knowing that there's no possible way that could have occurred normally, then I was converted not to belief in the paranormal or supernatural, but to the fact that there's some things which can't be explained, which should be explained.
John Hamer became so captivated by the puzzle, he began to research similar cases. He didn't have far to look, just 30 miles away and 27 days later.
Hi, I'm Chris Choi from BBC Television. I'm doing some research into unexplained fire deaths, and I believe that something happened here in 1980. Would it be okay if we came in?
Yeah, if you want to.
9 a.m, February the 2nd, 1980. A neighbour of 75-year-old Annie Webb noticed smoke-blackened windows in this terraced house in Corporation Road. When Annie failed to answer the door, the police were called. They were greeted by darkness, a foul smell, and a pile of fine ash on the kitchen floor.
She was, lying
down here? Down here, a pile of ashes in this area. There was a table by here, and just the lower part of her legs was laying partly under the table, still with the stockings on. Over here was her right arm with a hospital tag around the wrist, and there you had the gas fire, and her head was on the tiled hearth to the right of the gas fire.
What's your explanation?
It's spontaneous human combustion. I mean, if a person catches fire through falling into a fire, their clothing catches fire, all their clothes burn off them, and you get the body partly burnt but not badly burned at all. Now, in spontaneous human combustion, the torso is totally destroyed, which is the opposite of normal burning, and the odd extremities remain.
There was no evidence Annie Webb had fallen onto the fire. What I found are two cases with striking similarities. In both, how exactly the victim caught fire is unknown, but these people were reduced to ashes, and yet a lot of the furniture that surrounded them was left untouched. And then there's the oddity of those disembodied limbs just left there. These don't look like the effects of ordinary fires, but I need to find out more about that.
The same way as the fat in this
So to the scientists, most say there is no mystery, that it's all been explained by what they call the wick effect. In other words, the victim's clothes catch fire and behave like a wick. As body fat melts, it acts like the wax. The theory doesn't explain how the fires start in the first place. A scientist demonstrated on TV. He used animal fat wrapped in cotton.
That acts as a very effective wick for the burning of the animal fat below.
This is the accepted scientific verdict on spontaneous human combustion, that the body burns rather like a candle. But if you accept that, you have to wonder why anybody would sit around long enough to slowly burn in that way. And just look at this, the bone left behind when the scientists tried to prove his theory. And you'll notice they look nothing like the fine powder described in the cases I've been talking about. There's no way that this answers the puzzle.
So how could bone be reduced to ash? A crematorium might hold the answer.
The remains are introduced into the primary chamber and then we introduce oxygen and heat by means of air jets and gas burners.
So we're talking about here, and we can actually see it on the screen, incredibly high temperatures.
Yes. Primary chamber temperature, we're currently just over 1,000 degrees, that's degrees centigrade. It can go up to anything up to 1,200 degrees.
How long does it take to reduce the remains down?
For an average cremation, if there is such a thing, round about an hour and a quarter from actually charging the remains to raking the remains out at the end of the cycle. And the remains look like this.
So that is nothing like a fine white powder. I can still clearly make out bones there. They still look like bones.
That's right. That's exactly as they are removed from the cremator. We have to put them through a further process known as cremulation, and that reduces them to a fine powder, such as you see here.
Now, the fire deaths that I've been investigating, witnesses talk about finding fine ash like that in somebody's front room as a result of...
Strange.
I mean, is there anything in your professional experience that could account for that?
It would certainly be a mystery to me.
Crematoria dispose of bones in less than 2 hours. The wick effect takes more than 12, but would even that produce the fine ash that is an accepted feature of such cases? Someone with a strange expertise might just help.
We've done some experimental work with animal bone, some of those were left 24 hours. And again, we had compatible temperatures to what we had in modern crematoria. And we still had an entire skeleton left on the pyre after 24 hours.
And that would be like this, so still clearly a bone left after that process?
Oh yes, unless you're talking about extreme temperatures, extreme high temperature, that would be in excess of 2,000 degrees centigrade.
And hard to imagine how that could happen in somebody's front room.
Well, certainly and not set fire to their furniture, I would say, yes.
The widely accepted explanation for these kind of cases is something called the candle effect. What's your verdict on that?
I think perhaps there may be more than one phenomena involved, and you found an explanation for one and assumed it explains them all, whereas in fact there could be more than one thing at work here.
An ordinary kitchen, the setting for a rare eyewitness account, a case John Hamer uncovered. This is the chair where Jeannie Saffin started to burn on the 15th of September 1982. Her brother-in-law saw what happened.
I was emotionally in the wall, and I heard my father-in-law call out, which I couldn't quite describe what he was saying, being a bit deaf. And I put the brush down, and then I was this horrific smell. I've never smelled anything like it. It was, well, I just can't describe it. It was then that I rushed in. I knew that something was wrong. I rushed into the kitchen, and Jean was standing in this area here. And flames were coming from her stomach here, and they were coming out of her mouth. It's just like a dragon, and the roar was worse, fiercer than a furnace. And, well, I stood at the doorway there. I was in shock for a few seconds, maybe longer. I don't know how long.
While she was on fire, was she panicking, moving around the room, trying to...
No, she just stood here. This is what was so pathetic. Stood here, she never cried, whimpered, just stood there looking, staring.
Where in this room did the fire start? You're saying that there wasn't a flame anywhere?
The flame started from within Jeannie herself.
So there was no flame anywhere?
There was nothing in here whatsoever.
Not even a little pilot light?
No, they'd never pilot light.
Jean died 8 days later in hospital. At the inquest, they had to decide how it had happened. What did they say?
Nothing. They didn't want to know. No matter what I said, they wasn't going to put it down in paper. They'd made up their minds what they was going to say and what they was going to do, and they'd done it.
The verdict was misadventure. A former engineer from the USA, Larry Arnold, has been investigating cases for more than 20 years. He has a number of theories.
Some of these instances can best be explained as chemical processes in the body going haywire. Likewise, electrical currents run through the body, through everyone's body, and sometimes we think the electrical energy in the body goes haywire, causing the body literally to fuse out from within. At the subatomic level, at the very small, minute level inside the human body, there are tremendous forces at play. And we think in some cases those tremendous energies are unleashed to create what we call a human Hiroshima. The body, the individual, will literally explode from the inside out, much like a bomb would.
What's intriguing is that Jeannie Saffin's family tell me that she was in a trance as the blaze took hold. Could mental state have any role to play in this, do you think?
We think the state of consciousness, the mental aspect of the individual, can play a key role in many of these bizarre blazes. What we found in many instances is that the person prior to the spontaneous combustion is melancholy, has been depressed, perhaps is even thinking of suicide.
You've got a number of different theories, but no real 100% explanation. How's it going to be solved?
Spontaneous human combustion is not going to be solved by denying its existence. We have to look at the evidence, we have to examine the facts, we have to get quantitative data and to analyze and find out exactly what circumstances are present when these people become human torches. Until that time, people are going to continue to die from this very strange, very rare, but quite fascinating malady.
When Charles Dickens used spontaneous human combustion to kill off his character Krook in Bleak House, it was seen somehow to be divine retribution for a wicked and drunken man. Today, we're less judgmental, but that paranormal tag remains, preventing scientific research and making an early end to the mystery unlikely.
Do you touch wood, avoid walking under ladders, or feel your heart sink if you see a single magpie? If so, then you're certainly not alone. Many people believe that their own luck or bad luck affects the course of their lives. Most scientists have dismissed this as an irrational superstition not worthy of study. But now a team based at the University of Hertfordshire is trying to find out if luck really does have the power to control our fate.
Lynn, I'm going to present you with a simple scenario and then ask you a question. Imagine you're waiting to be served in a bank. While you're waiting, an armed robber bursts in and fires a shot, and the bullet catches you in the arm. Would you consider yourself to be unlucky, lucky, or neither?
Lucky, because he could have hit me in the heart and I could have been lying there dead.
I think I'd be unlucky because I'd be the only person in the bank who gets shot in the first place anyway. That'd have my name on it.
Imagine that you accidentally slip on some stair carpet in a friend's house, fall down the stairs and twist your ankle.
Unlucky, because I do a lot of driving and that's going to hamper me a little bit. But then again, I would also have been lucky that I hadn't broke my neck.
I'd consider myself to be unlucky, but that scenario happens to me quite frequently.
Our research assesses both psychological and parapsychological explanations for luck. So we consider the possibility that people might be kidding themselves, that luck doesn't exist, it's just in literally the mind of the beholder. We also take seriously the possibility that it might be true, it actually exists, and some people are truly luckier than others.
My name's Lynn Suzanne, and I live in Skegness, Lincolnshire with my husband. I'm a freelance writer and I've just published my second book. I sent my first article into a national competition magazine. It was accepted, so I sent in a second one, and by a great coincidence, the regular columnist was leaving, and they asked me if I'd like to do the job, so I thought, right, so I did.
My name is Marie Rawsthorne. I live in Skelmersdale, Lancashire, with my husband and young daughter, and I work in a hostel for homeless young people. It was the week after my driving test. I took this car out for a test drive and I promptly crashed it into this poor man's wall, giving him whiplash and my husband, and that's it, I had to buy it.
Lynn and Marie are two of the 120 people taking part in the research based at the University of Hertfordshire and funded by the Leverhulme Trust.
In our first pilot study, we found out that lucky people thought they could control their luck. They treated it like a skill, and they carried out various superstitious behaviours to keep themselves lucky. The unlucky people were the exact opposite. They're very fatalistic, they thought they were born unlucky, or they'd been jinxed or cursed. There was nothing they could do about it, that's just the way it was.
Wow! The string of events that made me think I was unlucky was when I was about 17, 18 years of age. My mother died, so I went to live with various relatives. My grandparents who I was living with both died. I went to live with an auntie and she died. And at which point, nobody else wanted me in the family to stay with them. I think they thought bad luck would rub off.
I started entering crossword competitions, so I sent one off and I was delighted when I won a £10 gift voucher. So I started to enter more competitions, and within a short space of time, I'd won a holiday to the Lake District, then I won my first car, and then I won a trip to Miami for 4. 2 years after I won my first car, I won my second car in a national competition. It was my mum's 70th birthday, so I decided to give her the keys.
One of the main psychological explanations that we're looking at is the possibility that lucky and unlucky people simply have rather selective memories, that they're living lives with the same number of positive and negative events in, but they're looking back on their lives, and if they think themselves lucky, they're just remembering the times that things worked out well for them, the times they passed exams, the times they got the job. The unlucky people are doing the exact opposite. They're looking back and just remembering the negative events.
I actually met my husband when my first blind date broke both his legs on a motorbike accident. So my husband was brought in as an extra, and on the way to meet me, he actually walked into a glass door and broke his nose and turned up anyway, but we didn't exactly get off to a good start, to say the least. This is the church that my husband and I were due to get married at, and unfortunately it was burnt down by arsonists 2 weeks before the wedding, so we had to get married elsewhere.
When I was working in a school in Birmingham, I suddenly thought it'd be a nice idea to have a job in London, to live on the south coast and have a flat or a house which overlooked the sea. I didn't think any more about it, and then about 4 years later, I applied for a job in London. When I went down for an interview, he said the school you'll be working at is at Bexhill-on-Sea. And when we moved in, we had a flat and every room overlooked the sea. It was absolutely wonderful.
Part of our research looks at the possibility that lucky and unlucky people might be using some kind of psychic ability to influence their lives. And we're looking at that by presenting them with a chance task, which in this case is a computerised coin flip. Now 50% of the time it should come up heads, 50% tails.
I think if you concentrate on what you're actually doing, you can will this little man to get them right on. Tails, because although it's random, they always say that luck and random choice doesn't go on what's gone before, but I do think that you can control it.
I don't really think there's any psychic element involved in being unlucky, but I don't like to think there is anyway. I wouldn't like to think that subconsciously I'm causing my own psychic downfall. It'd be disheartening to think you were doing that.
In one of our early pilot studies, we had a small number of students perform on the coin flipping task. We found those that considered themselves lucky did a little bit better than chance, those that considered themselves unlucky to do a little bit worse than chance. So that's tentative evidence there's something very interesting going on, that luck might actually exist. But it's early days yet, and it's a result we want to follow up on.
I just think I come from a pessimistic family. I've probably got socialised bad luck.
But I think the end results will be nice to sort of see, you know, what
If there is any particular reason for it.
And if there's a cure.
Yeah,
in my case.
The research suggests that people's belief in luck really does influence how they see their lives. Now, if we can understand those beliefs and possibly alter them, we can change the way in which people see and live their lives.
Richard Wiseman wants to find out whether people who think they're lucky are more successful at the National Lottery than those who think they're unlucky. He's designed a questionnaire, so if you think you're especially lucky or unlucky and you intend to play the lottery this Saturday, then please phone for a copy. The number to dial is 0800 767 800. All calls are free and the lines will remain open for an hour after the programme. We'll give you the results later in the series. You never know, you might be luckier than you think. Next we move to a story from Brecon in Powys. Bill and Liz Rich have rented their remote cottage for the past 7 years and throughout that time have suffered a number of harrowing experiences. In this film they tell their own story and the images are an accurate depiction of what they say appeared. It starts with an encounter 7 years ago.
Well, there's such a feeling of evil, as if you're being watched, as if something's out to hurt you in this house. What happened in that room was very, very frightening. At the time, we didn't understand what was going on. Now we do. And we knew, well, I know now that we had another 7 years of hell in front of us.
There was a very great fear, something that one couldn't find. It wasn't tangible. You couldn't chase it down, you couldn't pin it down. But it was there, drumming up the fear. Yeah, terrifying.
Since we've moved into this place, we've had horrifically high electricity bills, £200 to £300 a month. Now we've got an Argo over there, which is oil-fired, that heats the hot water, that heats the radiators, that cook in it. It does mostly everything. So really, I mean, I don't have a dishwasher, don't have a tumble dryer. So what have I really got here? Not much at all when you look at it in that way. A washing machine. So it doesn't make any sense to me that we should be using that quantity of electricity.
We had many checks done by Swalec and by independent electrical engineers many times, and indeed the place was rewired in November 1990. We clearly have a problem here that nobody has found.
I can't explain it. I'm not a psychic, I'm not an electrician, I'm just me, and me doesn't understand. One day I've been shopping and with Becca and Ben, you know, just got out of the car with 2 kids, loaded. That the last thing I was thinking about was anything weird and wonderful. What it was, I don't know, but I would say that it was one of the most evil things here. Whether or not that, in fact, is it, taken on a different form, I don't know. Don't know.
I'm actually a Baptist minister, and I've come in contact with helping people and finding that they've been possessed by either evil spirits or troubled by angelic beings. And over the years, I've just dealt with them as I've found them. And Bill and Liz were 2 of these people who contacted me for help. As I walked into the kitchen and was talking with Bill and Liz on this first occasion, I could see out of the corner of my eye, just about here, a 7 foot, I would reckon, a figure standing there, and I think it had its arms folded, and it was there the whole time, and the whole place certainly had something about it which made you a bit uneasy. And we believe that somewhere in the past, even going back as far as the Druids, and certainly somewhere in this area, someone has put a curse on this place. Bill and Liz had allowed things to come into their life which were not Christian, that were affecting them. Anyway, we burnt all the things, destroyed the objects and the pictures and various other things.
Anything that he thought that might be causing a problem, i.e. the books that we were reading, indeed one painting that had an eye in it, he thought that was a bad symbol. But I thought that if they were in any way responsible to what was coming in, then I was glad to be rid of them, because I thought at that time that that was simply going to be putting an end to it.
I think from every person that's been in here, and we're talking of about 30, maybe more, we're all talking of Celtic, pagan, black magic, which seems to have gone on here at one point or another. Now, I mean, locally, unknown to us when we moved in, everyone knew this was a weird house.
These ruins that you see around you were fascinating to us when we first moved in here, because all the stone from here was actually put into the conversion of the barn in the 1950s. Certainly the site has been found to be terribly sensitive. Historically, we've been back as far as we can, but we can't get it back any earlier than the 16th century. The problem might have begun here, and through the rebuilding, ended up there.
It's a bit like a roller coaster, the last 7 years. You get someone in, and it would be clear, the house would be clean, you get all your hopes raised, and you'd feel great. It would come back again. And then you've got to go through the whole procedure of finding someone who can please help. You find them, it goes away, come back again. After living in this sort of atmosphere for 7 years, you doubt your own judgment. This can be a big problem. You think you're imagining it and making it up. So sometimes it's so good to have that third person coming in and saying, look, you're talking rubbish, there's nothing going on. Or, you've got a problem, let's try and deal with it.
I go into people's places, people's houses, if they say they're haunted and they're being troubled, and I make contact with the entity and go through a process of releasing them. When I came here the first time, I found myself approached by a spirit in great distress, and he was the victim of a murder. He told me that he'd witnessed a satanic ritual being carried out in this area and had been unwise enough to talk about it, and he was killed. He also told me that, and I felt this, that he was struck on the back of the head with an axe.
We spent some time looking through historical records and found that in the mid-1800s, 1840s, I think it was, local history showed that a local farm worker was murdered in a pretty horrific way with an axe to the back of the head.
Evil attracts evil, dark attracts dark, like attracts like. And here we have a situation where, because of its past history, it was, as it were, a breeding ground for other evil to follow. I think there is a great and pressing need for this place to be cleansed, perhaps finally. I am always careful about making final statements. I'm hopeful that it's been finally cleared up, but I wait on Bill and Liz's experience.
After Ghostbuster Eddie Burks visited Bill and Liz, they say the evil presence returned. So what's going on? Could there be a perfectly normal explanation after all? We've asked Dr. Richard Wiseman to explore this possibility. As we said earlier, Richard is a psychologist and he's specialised in the paranormal for about 10 years. He's well known for his sceptical view, and throughout the series he'll be suggesting how conventional science might explain some of our most baffling stories.
I find these sorts of cases fascinating, but as a scientist I always want to look at the evidence and find out if it's accurate and reliable. Under such close scrutiny, lots of the claims crumble, although in a few instances it is difficult to find a definitive explanation, and these are the cases that I find most interesting. Liz and Bill say that they've seen several apparitions and sensed some sort of evil presence. However, they also describe themselves as creative, sensitive and intuitive. And it's these type of people that have the biggest problem telling the difference between an event they've actually experienced and one they've simply imagined. I wondered if that was the case.
I saw these things, they were there, and I saw them at the times when I would be least likely to use my imagination. You know, the one when I saw this tall black figure, I mean, I'd had a baby in a carry cot, I had heaps of shopping. I was aiming to get out of the car, into the house, dump all the gear off me, and then get on with what I was getting on. I wasn't in the frame of mind to imagine something.
The case has attracted a lot of attention. You've had lots of people through, some of them trying to help you, and lots of them have experienced exactly the same sorts of things as you have. And again, it seems to me that maybe they've come here with the right sort of expectations and that shaped their experiences.
There was no sort of auto-suggestion
whatsoever. We made a definite
in
purpose
most
of
of
that,
the cases.
If it was just Bill and I, okay, you know. But there's so many people out there that have come in and heard something, sensed something, seen something.
I've looked at the electricity bills and they are quite high, about £400 a quarter. However, if they kept on the 2 electric fires for maybe 7 or 8 hours a day, it might be possible to run up this amount. They have an Aga, which is oil-fired, in the kitchen, and that heats 2 radiators upstairs, and in the main room they have a log fire. But it's an old stone cottage, and it might be possible to underestimate exactly how much heating it really needs.
I'd be a rather silly person if the radiators were nice and warm, if the Aga was nice and warm, and I still decided to put 2 electric heaters on upstairs and down, with a log fire as well. I mean, the house would be uncomfortably hot, and for 8 hours a day. I mean, why would I do that?
On the film, there's the piece about the book burning. Did you have a lot of those sorts of books?
No. We had about 3 or 4 of them that were taken away, but they certainly weren't active occultists.
I mean, one was a homeopathic pharmacopoeia, which cost a fortune. And I mean, I see nothing wrong with homeopathic medicine. It's no more worse, no better than orthodox. And that was taken away as being occult. I can't understand that.
I suppose the most obvious question which most people want answered is, why didn't you just move out when these things started to happen? What kept you here?
Money. Lack of it. When we moved in, we had plenty of money. We were fine. We then got into such a financial muddle that we couldn't move. We couldn't buy anywhere. House prices for rental around here went right up. We were stuck. I mean, the one thing I would say to people who are going through this sort of thing, it's very hard because there's no sympathy given to you. You're either classed as maybe mad, on drugs, alcoholic, or just imagining it anyway. It's very hard to find someone that you can go to who can really understand what you're on about.
Having spent the day with Bill and Liz, I think they're genuine people. I've talked with them, I've looked around the house and the gardens. The 15th century ruins at the back of the house could cause some people to imagine all sorts of strange things. And Liz reports seeing a tall, dark apparition in the kitchen. Now, perhaps that was a reflection, a shadow, or a hallucination. It's difficult to know for certain. The sense of evil is perhaps easier to explain. Scientists have carried out controlled laboratory experiments where they place people in strong electromagnetic fields which stimulates the brain, and they report exactly those sorts of sensations. I think the case is an interesting one. I haven't found any definite proof of the paranormal, but it has been difficult to find a rational explanation for all of the experiences.
Since we made the film, Bill and Liz have moved, and we wish them a trouble-free life in their new home. Finally tonight, we've all heard bumps in the night, strange noises when we're tucked up in bed, sounds which we might put down to the plumbing or creaking floorboards. But what if you hear footsteps? You go to investigate and there's nobody there.
Well, I was living in Northumberland a few years ago, more than 10 years ago. Lovely old house set in a very remote valley about 10 miles from anywhere. It had 2 staircases, each going up to 1 bedroom. I'd been there about 3 years, when something woke me up. A noise. I thought there was somebody in the house. Sounded very much like footfalls coming from the other staircase. But I looked round, nobody there, went back to bed. This happened several times on different evenings, always after bedtime. The noise always lasted for the same length of time, several seconds, in fact half a minute. It didn't bother me at all. It bothered the cat. She didn't like it one bit. It came to me that I was hearing 11 footfalls, which is a little bit strange because there were only 9 steps. After 9 steps, there was a squeak, followed by 1 final footfall step. So I worked it out that whatever it was going upstairs. Couldn't have been coming down because the next to the top step was the squeaky one. I got a bit fed up with the bedrooms being apart from each other, so got some builders in, and the idea was to take 1 staircase out and join the 2 bedrooms together upstairs. They had to take out part of the floor in the lower hall, big sandstone slabs. They took them out, and here underneath those slabs were 2 steps. Now nobody alive could have known about those 2 steps because that floor had been there for at least 200 years, possibly a lot longer. After the staircase was removed, the noises continued, and they continued until the day I left that house.
A strange coincidence, perhaps? Even stranger if the footsteps could still be heard after the staircase had gone. Before we go, here's another reminder of our telephone number, 0800 767 800. Phone now if you want to take part in our luck experiment. Do join us next Tuesday when Chris will be listening to mysterious noises which are said to come from the wall of an old inn. And I'll be attempting to discover if the feeling of being stared at really could be a psychic 6th sense. Good night.